She's a mother, she's a wife, she's a businesswoman, and currently, Kathy Landing is one of the members of Mount Pleasant Town Council. Now, she wants to serve the Lowcountry in Washington as his next Congresswoman for District 1. I sit down exclusively with Kathy for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and download my free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. Kathy Landing, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, thanks, Quintin. It's great to be here.
Yes, ma'am. I know that obviously you're juggling a lot because obviously you're a mom, you're a wife, you're a businesswoman, you are a Mount Pleasant Town Councilwoman, you're a community activist, and obviously you're running for the 1st Congressional District of South Carolina. Who is Kathy Landing these days?
Well, I'm someone who juggles a lot, and I think I've taken multitasking to a whole new level.
And let me get over to the issues in the 1st Congressional District. 1st Congressional District candidate Nancy Mace on the Republican side wrote an op-ed to the Post-Inquiry recently, and I want to break down a part of that for this particular interview. And it reads this from Nancy, quote, "When Joe Cunningham ran for Congress, he led us to believe he wouldn't be a lapdog to the extreme National Democrats or to his party's radical leadership. His independent streak would always prevail," he said. "There have been signs that our independent voice is a facet, but it all became clear last week. After a year in office, we learned a lack of experience and a deficit of leadership has left a hole in the independent streak that for years was the 1st Congressional District. We also learned that Cunningham is unable to stand up to Nancy Pelosi. The bipartisan talk was just that. For weeks now, Cunningham said impeachment was just not his focus." Ms. Landing, let me ask you this. What should be his focus right now?
Well, the number one job of the House of Representatives is outlined very clearly in the Constitution, and that is to control the purse strings of Congress. We have not seen that happen at all, and we haven't seen it happen for many years, really even when we had Republican leadership. In 2010 is the very last time we passed a budget. And when I started researching whether I should run and whether I would be a good fit for Congress and to serve as the voice of the 1st District, one of the things I learned was that there are no investment advisors nor financial planners in Congress. And one of the first things a financial planner learns in helping people plan for the future, and corporations and endowments, is to have a budget, to know what your cash flow is and how to manage it. And so I think that the problem right now is with all the impeachment talk and all the impeachment inquiry that has now been voted on and proceeded in the inquiry stage, that they are completely shirking their true responsibilities to the American people.
And I'm going to get to that in just a few minutes. She goes on to say this, Nancy Mace said is, quote, "However, being a member of Congress means you have a responsibility to lead us through tough political times, like this one. Leadership means you communicate. It means you believe in transparency and the rule of law. Leadership means doing the right thing, even against your own party." Let me ask you this. If you were to be elected to Congress today, how would you communicate?
One of the interesting things about being in the business I'm in and building a business from zero 34 years ago to a very, very successful investment advisory practice is the fact that I had to many, many times over the years take very complicated concepts and articulate them in plain English. And so this is one of the things that's lacking, again, from Washington in general, and even from the news, is that you'll hear about sound bites, but you don't get actual explanations of what's going on and why that affects everyday folks. And so I believe one of my strongest points, other than a very, very strong background in finance and the economy, is the fact that I can communicate very clearly, and I have a very positive message that really would reach out to all Americans, even though I am very strongly fiscally conservative. So I feel right now that my calling is to make sure that we get our financial house in order while times are strong and good in our economy, because that helps us prepare for a rainy day. Right now we're spending so much money, we're not preparing for a rainy day at all.
And if you were to communicate with the citizens of District 1 right now, what would you tell them the issues are?
So we have already seen on many levels, and this is even true in Mount Pleasant here, it's true throughout Beaufort County, which I've been down to visit many, many times. It's certainly true all over Charleston County. We have seen a tremendous lack of moving the ball forward on infrastructure. And this affects so many things, the obvious ones being bridges and roads, but also the issues related to flooding. And one of the biggest problems is people say, well, if you're interested in helping infrastructure, that means you're going to be spending more money. But the reality of how to tackle a problem like this is that there are many facets. And one of the ones that the federal government, I think, has made many mistakes on is way over-regulating. It is extremely important that we be respectful of and very good caretakers of our environment. At the same time, it shouldn't take 6 to 8 to 10 years to do the studies that are associated with this. And it's often been those studies that have held up the process. I think there's just too much red tape, and I think our president is very interested in rolling back a lot of the things that have slowed down both businesses' ability to grow, individuals to get jobs, and also for us to be able to move forward with important projects that will serve the American people. So that is probably the biggest thing. The second one is what I've already said about a budget, and that is I can hit the ground running on helping people focus much better on not only getting the budget off the shelf. It's never been negotiated this year. Let's get a budget that's actually negotiated. Let's look at the numbers and let's find a way to cut a lot of the waste. There are reports out every single year by the U.S. Government Accountability Office that show all the redundancy and waste, and nobody is doing anything about it. So these are two of the main areas. There's obviously many, many more immigration related and border security and many other issues.
If you were to look at the numbers right now, what would you try to take out the budget if you were a congresswoman?
First of all, there is a lot of overlap. And as I mentioned about the U.S. Government Accountability Office, the report they do annually has numerous items that are already defined and well documented. And in the past couple of years, there's been at least one year where there were over 300 items. And yet we didn't hear anything about any of these being looked at in order to actually cut waste. So there's a lot of talk about things like the pennies plan or the penny plan, the 1 or 2% plan to balance the budget. But that's like mini sequestration. If everybody remembers sequestration was when they cut 10% across the board. And the problem was it ends up gutting very, very important programs such as things related to our veterans and to the military and to things that really ended up being set so far back that it's taken quite a bit just to build them back to where they need to be. Some of them aren't back yet. So it needs to be a much more thoughtful process where we go through. We have, for instance, over 600 agencies and sub-agencies of the U.S. government. And I'm actually quoting Dr. Carson on this. He said this during the primary run, and that was, he said, you know, if you have that many agents and sub-agencies, do you think there's a chance we have a little overlap? And I believe that is definitely true. The federal government has gotten so far out of the bounds of what the Constitution framers originally intended that I think we definitely need to look at kind of putting the genie back in the bottle, and that's going to take a lot of hard work and a lot of working together with people, which I'm prepared to do.
And let me get back to the impeachment, which the hearings began earlier today. And Nancy says this in the op-ed for the Post-Inquiry. She says this, quote, "When this strategy failed, the Democrats doubled down on impeachment. Schiff and his staff coordinated with a whistleblower who lacked first-hand knowledge and was alleged to be a John Brennan and Susan Rice plant. Some news accounts said that the alleged whistleblower was also booted from the White House in 2017 because of a starring role in the Russia hoax. In your mind, Kathy, should the whistleblower's name be revealed, that is?
Well, let me just say, I'm commenting on things that you're asking. A lot of this is related to a particular article that is one person's perspective
Sure.
with the information they had on hand at the time. I believe strongly that, not just I believe, this is part of our rule of law system, is that you have the right to face your accuser, and that person should be revealed. There should be in this case, there should be no reason whatsoever to have this be a secret. The entire process is being handled in a way that is false and unfair to the American people. The Republican Party cannot subpoena to the extent that they should, or even at all in some cases. So I believe strongly that the entire proceeding is being handled very poorly, and I actually think it's going to backfire on the Democratic Party.
And she also says this too: many amendments to the resolution were put forth by Republicans, and every one of them was rejected. Which one of those resolutions were rejected, and which ones would you bring forth right now if you were a congresswoman?
I actually would not comment on specific resolutions that they've brought forth. I think it's better at this point to simply say that the entire proceedings have been done inappropriately. If it were to go back now, if we roll back, which we cannot do, one of the first things was the fact that they already basically had made the judgment that the president was guilty before they even started. And I've heard this said, and I believe it's true. They felt like, okay, we have our man, let's find a crime. And we saw over 2 years of the Mueller, in fact, 2.5 years of the Mueller investigation, and millions of dollars of taxpayer money spent to find absolutely nothing involved in Russian collusion. It is disgusting that we continue to see the same thing now. So rather than comment on specific things that would have been proposed by the Republicans, I strongly believe the whole process should stop and we should move forward with what needs to be done for America.
And if you were to write an op-ed to the Post-Courier right now, what would you say to the 1st Congressional District?
What I would say, I actually have several in the works on different topics very specifically. So I think it's important that the 1st District know that I'm prepared to hit the ground running to serve. And I do want to hear all voices. I want to hear what everyone's thoughts are. I do believe strongly that the things that affect us the most right now are, one, we need to keep this economy strong. It has been a tremendous boon to our area as well as the whole country, but definitely our area, to see all the global investment in our area. We have over 140 UK-based companies. We have numerous, I don't have the exact number, but numerous German-based companies. Part of the reason for this was the tax cuts. And when the corporate tax cut especially happened, it made America much more attractive and competitive. So companies wanted to come here. Charleston County area and Beaufort County as well, being such a beautiful area, and Berkeley County, and all of them, being such a beautiful area, have now attracted many companies. And so we're seeing commerce grow. We're seeing great jobs come here. So the first thing is we need to keep this economic growth going. I'm prepared to go up there and help that because I understand how the economy works on a very deep level. And I believe strongly that if we can start getting our financial house in order and get a budget and then get a balanced budget, while the economy is strong and while we have strong tax revenues, we can keep things going and not have to go into a recession in the future. And then the other major things I would say in op-ed pieces are varied. Some of them do have to do with infrastructure. I have a lot of ideas on how we can move forward, not just with some of the deregulation, again, still being very conscious of wanting to protect the environment, but let's not have things be 6 to 8 to 10 years of bureaucracy. That's wrong on all levels. It makes things way more expensive as costs skyrocket, and it also makes people suffer for a lot longer. But another thing is we need to have more involvement from the private sector. Companies are willing to put money. They have marketing budgets that in many cases are huge anyway. They're willing to put money into things that will not only give them great exposure from a goodwill viewpoint, but also in many cases directly benefit their business. Use an example. People know that we don't have broadband in many parts of South Carolina and throughout the country. How many companies benefit when you have internet access? It's hard for most of us to understand not having internet access, but it's horrible for those that don't. They're being left behind educationally as well as in their ability for commerce, for buying things and so forth, and competitive markets. And the reason this is important is because people think of companies like Microsoft or Google and they say, oh, well, this would be great if they get involved in helping bring broadband everywhere. Well, what about MasterCard and Visa and American Express? These are companies that benefit every time you buy something online. So there are lots of great ideas on how to solve problems that don't necessarily involve raising taxes, and in my case would not propose nor would vote for raising taxes. We can solve a lot of problems that can help the 1st District and America and work together to do it.
And you talked earlier about tax revenues. How much is that in the 1st Congressional District?
So the overall numbers for the 1st District,
yes, ma'am.
So I don't have the exact figure for you today, but what I will say is that we certainly pay our fair share here. As a district, there are many programs that go to the federal government right now that I actually believe we should roll back considerably. A good example of this is I'm very, very strong on having a lot more support at the local and state level for education. The problems that we have in South Carolina are not totally unique to South Carolina, but they are things that we're aware of on the more local level that the federal government doesn't necessarily deal with everywhere. And I have a real problem with the fact that they've tried to make through the Department of Education a one-size-fits-all approach. Things like Common Core and so forth have really made it tough on our schools and many others. So much of the money that you asked about, how much money goes, much of the money that goes there needs to either stay here or come back to us because we are in a much better position locally to make those decisions.
And what decisions would you make when it comes to the opportunity zones?
So the opportunity zones introduced by our wonderful Senator Scott
Yes.
are a great way of attracting corporations to realize that if they invest in areas that traditionally have been overlooked, that they will find wonderful, eager, hard workers, and that they will help do something that everyone will feel good about and will benefit all of America, which is to revitalize areas. And so I'm a big believer in that idea.
Okay.
I also believe, because here in Mount Pleasant we don't qualify for an opportunity zone, and yet we do have a lot of folks that need higher paying jobs. And so we've been working hard to do something through private sector investing in bringing a digital campus is one of the things we're working hard on right now. And we also have other projects we're working very hard on. So I think we can I think the opportunity zones are great, and I think we need to do more of it by attracting corporations that are in a position to do so, to locate in places that have been overlooked.
Let me get back to you, Kathy Landing. Obviously, like I mentioned, your wife, your mom, you're a businesswoman, you're a community activist, you're a councilwoman on town council here at Mount Pleasant. But who else is Kathy Landing when you take off all of those hats?
So it's interesting. Well, one of the hats, mom, which is a very important one, and I've spent a tremendous amount of time, as all moms and dads do, is that we are an empty nest now. So our children are grown.
Oh, cool.
And so even though your children never completely go away, and you obviously are always going to be there for them, it's not a day-to-day responsibility anymore like it once was. So I will say that one of the hats has changed in that I have capacity. It's one of the reasons why I believe I was inspired to run for office for council, was that I had capacity, and I felt that the skill set I had, which was, again, communication, problem solving, and diplomacy, I believe that those could apply to serving the public. And it has been a wonderful experience. So who am I today? Today, I have evolved, as I hope everybody does, into someone who now feels I can take that same skill set and apply it to a much broader group of people. I would love to serve the 1st District, and in so serving the 1st District, I believe I can really make a difference for all of America.
1st Congressional District candidate, Kathy Landing, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Quintin. You have a wonderful rest of the week.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.